working? I think it is.
I think we're good. I think we're working. We're live.
First of all, thank you for being here. Being here early, makes us, feel much better not speaking to an empty set of rows. So, very, very nice. And so, first let's set the table of what this conversation's even about, and then we'll introduce ourselves. Web3, as you heard, right, is the kind of the buzzword, the general topic, but it's far more than that, right? It's a new wave of technology that carries that banner, but you'll look back on this day and say, hey, remember in 2023 when just a few people gathered together to talk about this amazing thing that has changed the world? That is Web3, and it has so many implications for hospitality, and we'll dive into some of that today. So to start things off, I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to Peter. My name's Chad Horn. I'm a co-founder of a company, Devour. And we've released a product, think of it as the next generation DoorDash, next generation Uber Eats, that targets a younger consumer. My daughter plays a game called Roblox, and there's 65 million people who play this game every day. That is kind of like the younger end of who we are thinking about as the next generation consumer, who will make decisions around which restaurants to go to in an entirely different way than a lot of your guests do today. So our focal point has really been, while this whole category is still early, how do we make it maximally impactful for restaurant operators now, today? Because it's going to be a different conversation in 5 years, 3 years, even 1 year. Right? Now it's, Starbucks has gotten in the game and they're changing consumer expectations as we all sit here. But right now, what can restaurant operators do? That's our focus. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. As Chad mentioned, I'm Peter McManus. I'm vice president at a company called Dolphin Entertainment. We are DLPN on NASDAQ, but we're a collective of PR and marketing agencies, so we provide a lot of publicity and strategic marketing services to a bunch of food and beverage brands, but also restaurants, hotels, things like that. So I'm speaking it more about kind of the earned media, the influencer marketing side of things, and really why this is all important. And to Chad's point, what we were talking about is Web3 and NFTs, and talking about all this stuff can be, really scary and a hurdle to kind of go through. So even just coming out here, I'm sure we've all heard of Web3, but how many of us kind of really understand it? If you guys are thinking that you might not, you're definitely not alone. So for me, I come from a background of, as I mentioned, earned media and PR and pitching food reviewers at the Boston Globe or the New York Times. But what I realized was that I didn't understand Web3, but knew that this was an emerging technology that I should learn about, and we don't want to become dinosaurs. So what I did was spend the last 2.5 years kind of researching what this was. And, at first I saw a lot of crazy pictures online and not really sure what it was, but what I realized was that Web3 can be really a whole lot more if you're harnessing this technology correctly. It's not just a bunch of stoner monkeys that might get you access to a warehouse party in Brooklyn. But I think when we're talking about Web3, we're trying to go back to the point that it's a technology innovation. So for decades, we've been providing our food and beverage clients with marketing and publicity services to grow their bottom line businesses. But we start to see the shift even just with the internet. So with my job and what I do, we saw first food blogs coming, right? It wasn't just the New York Times food section, there was food blogs. So we had a shift to start giving these bloggers more credibility from a journalist coverage standpoint. As internet began to grow more and more and take more shape, we saw different ways of engaging these different audiences, and we saw the rise of food influencers, right? So the way I talk about these technology innovations, is through kind of these funny stories, especially with chefs, right? They can understand that the Boston Globe wants to cover their new restaurant opening and their new menu items. They could even understand the bloggers that were going to cover this. But when I went to a couple different chefs in their kitchen and said, you should comp a whole table of these influencers, they were ready to throw me out, throwing knives, in my direction, because what the hell, we're going to give this no-name influencer, a free meal? But my point was, this is an advancement in technology. These influencers now are getting more credibility. As annoying as they might be, they're actually impacting bottom line businesses. So the internet has played this huge role, and the internet isn't stopping, and the evolution doesn't stop, but how do we kind of shift with it? And that's kind of the basis of this conversation. So how do we harness this new technology, put it through a consumer lens, suck out all the benefits and distribute it out to the masses?
Yeah. First, I want to ask everybody, before this conversation today, who had ever heard of Web3? One guy. All right. Well, and that's phenomenal, right? Because think about this. I mean, what caught my attention, and it was probably, everybody's heard of Bitcoin. Even if you haven't heard of Web3, you've heard of Bitcoin. That was when 2004, 5. I mean, it's been around a while, but over the last few years, what caught my attention, being in restaurant tech for over 15 years of my career, I was starting to see the biggest tech companies getting into the space, right? Facebook famously renamed their company to Meta to tackle the metaverse. And I was watching, these massive, funds being raised to invest in Web3, that heads of massive tech companies leaving prominent roles to start some new Web3 venture. And there's just no denying the interest and investment that the space was gathering. And yet it wasn't making it to the mainstream level in conversation. But yet, when I looked under the hood at the tech and said, what kind of experiences is this going to enable for consumers in the world that matter, there was all kinds of amazing answers to that question, even though the space is new. It's kind of like being at the beginning of the internet, right, which we were talking about, Web 1. Like, I remember going to a state fair in California, walking up to a demo unit for where you dialed up. It wasn't even America Online back then, it was something else. And I remember going and using the internet for the first time, completely underwhelmed. I was like, who cares about this stuff? And yet, it was the beginning of something that would be transformational, or something similar with Web3. What came after that first phase of the internet, Peter?
Well, I am in PR and marketing, but I believe after one comes two. So
yes.
so we have Web 2. So while you were at the fair, using the internet for the first time, we eventually saw a shift in 2004 in what we call Web 2, and this was all these social interaction sites, the rise of Facebook and Instagram, and now Snapchat and TikTok. So from Web 1 was only read-only, static text. Now we entered into Web 2 in 2004, where you could read, you could write, you could interact, and you could live on these platforms to start talking with one another. So we saw that huge shift, and again, it's almost going back to that same example that I had of now influencers were important. No one even knew what an influencer was. It used to be, Madonna was an influencer, but now it's, Brunch Boys is an account and needs to be taken seriously. So that was Web 2, and now we're in the very early stages of Web 3 and where this innovation is going, which Chad, I think you have a real good grasp on.
Yeah, what caught my attention with Web 3 and was how it was facilitating digital communities coming together. And we'll unpack that, but the inevitability of it, how it was going to change consumer behavior. Because I remembered, I worked at a company that at the time I integrated a company called Checkmate that integrated DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, all those platforms into restaurant point of sale. And when the pandemic hit and restaurants were forced to shut down, everybody that wasn't already doing online ordering, immediately it was the most urgent thing for them to do. And they came to us asking for help. Hey, can you help me? I'm like, well, you hadn't already set up on those online platforms. We're not that company. There's a line, and we can't do anything about it. But as soon as you're there, if you want those orders integrated, cool, we can help you out. But because we were in that conversation, I would get emails or calls from restaurants. It was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I think people on my staff are going to die. Like, they were like freaking out. And ultimately, I was like, wait a minute. This is because technology that existed a long time before now you didn't get on board earlier. I mean, and at the same time, we were seeing massive restaurant chains making more money than they ever made before because they had operating drive-thrus and they had the delivery and pickups. So I couldn't help but see the same thing, looking forward to the future. Oh my gosh, the same thing's going to happen. Chipotle has gotten into the metaverse with a Roblox partnership. Taco Bell, McDonald's, all these big chains are spending tons of money to investigate the space, knowing that it's the future. And I was thinking, gosh, how is this going to look for independent operators? What's going to be something that can help them play in this space as the younger consumer starts making decisions around where they're going to go out to eat? How is it going to look that it's not the big chains that just take more and more and more market share? And that's what kind of forced me to get into this space in the first place, realizing somebody from this industry has to do something. It's not going to be the Web3 technologist to say, oh, I don't know the restaurant industry, but I'm going to figure this out for them. No. So for me, Web3, the central pieces of the technology that caught my attention, as I mentioned, digital communities. And the reason that this technology has created so many of them is because it allows for ownership and membership, which Peter will talk about. Actually, if you could unpack that now, like what is it about Web3 that enables communities to come together, memberships to form in a way that might help a restaurant operator?
Yeah, I think what you were touching on was, first and foremost, eliminating these third parties, to increase revenues there. But I think the core of it is engaging this next generation consumer and engaging more people where they are playing. And I think a way to do this, and the way that Starbucks and Chipotle and Taco Bell are doing it, is through loyalty programs or fan clubs in a way where you can not only use that as a marketing channel to reach more people, but it can soon become another viable revenue stream for your businesses, whether it's a subscription-based model, whether it's a loyalty program. For myself in particular, we have majority ownership in a couple of locations, one being the Midnight Theater in the new Manhattan West development down Manhattan. But what we're doing there, it's a three-tiered space. We have a theater, we have a bar and restaurant, and then we have a cafe on ground level that turns into a bar. But our problem is we need more butts and seats. We need to sell more coffee. We need people drinking at the bar. We need this place to be crowded. And the ways that we can do that is by creating an offering there of a Soho House-esque membership where, hey, we have a culinary membership. You can get all this access, all these perks. You pay this for the year. It can be recurring. Then after, the same way that someone might pay $350 to MasterCard to get different master classes and learn different yoga positions or butcher classes and things like that. What we're doing is operating on the blockchain so that it is native, it's direct revenue, that you can speak to a very core audience and build that community of fans around one core topic that can be recurring revenue coming through.
That makes sense. And so what I'm hearing, and this is important for everybody to know, is you can take this technology now, right, with like Peter's company and do a really curated experience for your own restaurant with this tech. And you're going to be tapping into technology that makes memberships make more financial sense and experiential sense for both the guests and you as a business operator. What we've also wanted to do to accelerate and reduce the barriers to entry and make it a simple first step is any restaurant that is getting orders from DoorDash, Uber Eats, etc. There's already infrastructure laid down to do that, whether that's a tablet, integration to the point of sale, an integrator like a Chowley or a Checkmate, etc. Otter, who's here. And we say, like, we know this category is intimidating. So let's take the technology, push that to a side, and let's focus on what matters: getting new business, attracting the next generation. So we said, if we handle all of the guest stuff and just send in orders, what will that look like, and how will that help this connection between Web3 and hospitality evolve? Very excited. I know most, even after this meeting, people aren't going to be like, oh, I got to jump in and understand what these Web3 communities all are about. Like, there's some ones that are completely wacky, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Some people have probably heard of this, but no, challenge to go and understand that, but just do know that there's 1 million followers of that group on Twitter. The purchasing power of this community is insane. The community is, because of the way blockchain assets work, it has a market cap of over $1 billion, a community of people. And I know as a restaurant operator, I want to tap into that. So whether it's them, whether it's a community of underwater basket weavers, or this group of gamers over here, or esports fans, or professional sports teams that have a community of followers enabled through this technology, what we've realized is, hey, we can make it easy for operators to tap into them and pull them into their business through a channel that already exists, that is well known, staff understands, the technology plugs right in. That's what we're focusing on. And sure, in the future, people will be ordering from video games, right? And I walk into a virtual restaurant, order a virtual pizza, and that might help my player have more health or energy or something, but it's also going to get delivered to me in the real world through the same infrastructure. I'm sure there's so much of it that's intimidating, but what we've seen really is the conversation where, like a year ago, you would have had to dive in. You would have had to understand the tech. Now it's the engine that powers the car, and you care about the car. You care about getting from point A to point B. The technology has become so easy so that even the users don't even know that they're using it. In fact, many of the restaurants using Web3 these days, because of platforms like ours, don't even know they're using it. It's just the tech, and the rest is the buzzwords of yesterday are no longer going to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I think we're just taking, like I've been saying, taking the benefits of this and being able to attract these new audiences without them even realizing it. I think last week we were on the phone on a Zoom together, and we were talking about if you all remember credit cards, when we used to make carbon copies, you might go into the store and use your credit card, and the cashier might get a workout, making a carbon copy. There's been tech innovation there. We all have credit cards with a chip on it now, and everyone goes up to CVS and taps their card, and they don't care how it works as long as it works. But they're not going into the technology of the chip that's on our credit card and where is that all going. The consumer doesn't care, but they want their life to be more convenient. They want more access. They want more perks. Everyone thinks they're more important than they are, and they want life to be convenient, and they want special access. I think for us, where we see it's definitely shifting the landscape the most is through subscription service, is through the loyalty programs, and there's ways to get over the hurdles. We've already fallen on our face a couple different times, so. We've gone through the headaches and know how to develop these types of programs, and it'll soon be everywhere for sure.
Yeah, the thing we mentioned earlier, how the chains, they're going to be in the space no matter what anybody else does, right? The question is what tools are going to be available for the independent operator to make a real strong move in this space. I'm very attracted to the new economic models that emerge from this space. So if DoorDash, who I referenced earlier, you have the user, they want food, right? They come on, there's a stakeholder in here. They're willing to pay the fees that they pay on that platform. The restaurant, I'm not a big fan of the fees, how high they can go on those third-party platforms at all. I'm not a fan of how data is shared or not, as the case might be. But there's two stakeholders, the restaurant and the consumer. In Web3, there's a third. It's the community. It's the community that has those fans, those users in their community that also want to build collaborations and partnerships with you as restaurant operators. So that's value to them, right? If you say, hey, I'll use the Bored Apes again just because I did before. Bored Apes, hey, we see you. We have this benefit for you. It could be a secret menu item. Bored Ape pizza, Bored Ape souffle, a banana, whatever it is on the menu that ties into them that you're saying this is for you exclusively. You didn't just create value for the consumer, you created value for a brand, a big brand. And they're going to want to recognize you, and what basically that means is it offsets the costs, right? It's not like, hey, I got to pay 30%, 25% for being on the third parties because that's just the fee structure that exists. No. In the future, the costs are going to get shifted to the brands that are deriving the value, whether that's a Web3 brand that makes no sense to you or a consumer packaged good brand like a Pepsi, a Coke, they're getting into the space, and you can provide value to them, and so many brands choose Coke or Pepsi to defray the costs associated with these platforms that tax that transaction and that consumer. So that in the future makes things very attractive for restaurant operators.
Yeah, I think that it's also a way to fundraise for restaurants too. Gone are the days where you need to have a brick and mortar immediately. What we're doing right now is opening up a membership cocktail lounge in New Orleans that has a charitable component, but we don't have a space yet. But we've sold a whole lot of memberships, and we're bringing that community to help shape what this cocktail lounge will look like, down to the interior, the paint colors, and if people are a higher tier membership, or if they've earned more loyalty, they might have a cocktail named after them on the menu. They'll get discounted buyouts of the space. But right now we don't have a brick and mortar. We just started opening up our membership sales. We're selling those membership sales right now, and we're using that money to market, to fundraise a bit more. We're going to use that money to find a location similar to how the Fly Fish Club guys did in New York. And we've created kind of a new business model where we don't have to take a huge risk, but we can start fundraising, build a really loyal community that is going to back this restaurant or cocktail lounge, and get the money needed to actually launch this, and also do some good for hurricane relief in New Orleans.
That's awesome. One thing that basically this moment in time that's so exciting for everybody here is that this category of technology is going mainstream as we speak, right? So information has leaked. There's articles now about how Amazon is launching a marketplace in Amazon for Amazon Prime members that now taps into that's a few hundred million consumers. They're going to build a blockchain account for everybody, right? Everybody's going to have a wallet that can hold digital assets, whether they realize that's what's happening in the background, that's allowing all Amazon Prime members to start accumulating these assets with benefits and access to every single collaboration partner that Amazon or Amazon's marketplace partners facilitate. That's crazy, right? And one of the virtues of Web3 is that collaborations, partnerships becomes infinitely easier. I've been a part of companies where even this company talking to this company, a loyalty platform with its user base, wanting to reconcile, well, what users do I have here versus the users that I have in my ordering platform database versus my front of house database. If I have one of those, kind of a complete customer data platform, nearly impossible in some cases with a lot of these companies because of the work that's required in integration. With Web3, the data exists externally, and all companies can go and grab what they want from it. There's some detail in there, of course, but so that is what allows with in 10 minutes for my company to say, okay, I want to enable restaurants to partner with fill in the blank. I can do that immediately because that data exists externally. So no integration work, no complicated conversations around how records are going to be updated. That problem goes away, and that's another thing, especially as the tech giants move in to make this technology mainstream. Watch out.
Yeah, and everything will be automated, right? Your revenues, however that's split amongst your partners, will all be living within a smart contract. So as revenues are coming in, it's being split up and sent immediately to whichever wallet is supposed to get it from the back end. So I think we covered a lot for sure.
How much time do we have left? Hopefully a lot.
I think 5 minutes left.
What? That's it?
No, you have 20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes.
Okay, I couldn't. Yeah, I was like, what? Okay, so I want to make sure we give some real concrete examples, Peter.
Great.
So I'm gonna start with a potential local example. So imagine you're an NFL fan. Hopefully, most of you don't have to imagine you're a Patriots fan or something like that. The NFL has done NFT tickets, commemorative tickets this year. So imagine a consumer experience. Oh, okay, I get my ticket to go to Foxborough, and I have a button in an email, get my NFT ticket. Maybe I don't know what that is. Click, I have it. It's this beautiful digital collectible. It's 3D holographic, that's neat. And then you find out that a nearby restaurant is saying, hey, NFL ticket holders, or you have that ticket, come in and you'll get, 20% off on this night, or free whatever if you come in. and it's only for you as a person who has that special ticket. That technology is easy, right? You don't have to do anything complicated. You just use a platform like ours, and we go, okay, that user comes in, they order, they get you don't have to validate them, you don't have to train your staff to say, oh, does this person have it or not? They just do that. They click, it's validated, they get the experience you want them to have. That's the kind of thing, right? The idea that you can reach out to community. Sports fans are easier to understand as a restaurant operator, but there's all kinds of different communities that you can reach out, recognize, and reward and provide an experience for that's exclusive. Make people feel like a VIP. Now, that's something concrete now, and there's in the future where things get really nuts is when you tap into people who are engaging with your brand in these digital environments. So imagine, maybe not you guys, maybe some of you guys, people who play games, right? Call of Duty, Roblox, like I mentioned earlier. Imagine you are in a game world, or someone you know is, and they are passionate about it, as many gamers are. And they see that if they order from a restaurant in that world, that this game that they're pouring hours and hours into, they get a power up, an advantage over other players that they put a lot of value in. And the way they unlock that is by ordering at that game from one of that game's restaurant partners, who will fulfill that order in real life in addition to giving the player an advantage in the game world. In that kind of environment, I've been part of some of these games from time to time, and I can tell you, people will order every day. Some probably multiple times a day. And that's the future, where that becomes the storefront, that becomes the channel. And as I promised, the big chains are going to be in those spaces, and there will be companies like us helping all restaurants be in those spaces and get traffic and volume and guest activity from those spaces as well. Peter, what are some of the more compelling real-world examples for you right now? Like, talk about those guest experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about food and beverage, we work with a bunch of different personalities, and how can we lean on their audiences to help grow their Web3 presence or their NFT presence? Something that we're working on right now. We represent Rachel Ray, and she is retiring from her syndicated talk show to do more digital content and to be a little more innovative in what she's doing next. But she has a ton of fans. She's put out like 30 or so cookbooks that all sell out, and we've always tried to strive different ways to try to reach her audiences or connect with her audiences. One of her past cookbooks, we did it via a ghost kitchen, when ghost kitchens were flying off the shelves, and that was kind of one example of that. But for her next cookbook, what we're trying to do is bring together a real core audience of 1,000 or 2,000 people to sell them the next Rachel Ray cookbook, but they'll have direct involvement. So on a monthly basis, throughout 12 months, they might be testing recipes with Rachel Ray, taking photos at home together and helping her craft what her next cookbook will be. They're paying for that, and then they might pay on top of that for Rachel Ray cooking materials, for a signed version of the cookbook, but they're also getting this other access and perks and meet and greets with Rachel that has a monetary value, but it's all operating on Web3. So there's many ways to skin the cat and to harness these benefits of Web3, from an individual level, from a property level, and of course to a brand level as well.
I think I'm hearing this in your answer, but I'll ask it this way and ask you to elaborate. How does Web3 and what you've seen and done help a restaurant take their loyal fan base and turn it into, or identify and focus on their hyper loyal fan base and really create an amazing experience for the people they should connect with the absolute most?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely what we're trying to do in New Orleans, right? We haven't sold these, cocktail membership lounge passes anywhere else but New Orleans, and it's with every great marketing campaign, it's really starting grassroots and locally, and if you can build a really solid foundation of fans that become your ambassadors, become your marketers for you, because they feel that they're involved in the product, involved in the restaurant, involved within this personality or influencer's life, they start to do the work for you as well and grow upon that audience.
Excellent. And as far as, let's talk about data for a second. As I was mentioning earlier how with the data around consumer being more and more decentralized on the blockchain, how are you seeing that play into the work you guys are doing?
Well, I think everyone is, no one wants to be controlled. I think what we're seeing in the restaurant industry is, number one, third party is difficult for the restaurant operator and the third party fees that come along with that. So how do we eliminate that? In the same way that you might be promoting your restaurant on Instagram, you don't own that data. While you can see how many likes and maybe some of your engagement levels via different tools, Instagram and Meta and Facebook, they all own that data. So, when we're talking about the data of your most loyal consumers, you want to be able to own that. You want to be able to target them specifically. You want to be able to not be censored. So, this is your own platform, your own data that isn't censored. I might be up here talking about a cough, and if I put it on Instagram, I might get a big COVID message on the front that I'm spreading misinformation. So, I think that's important to people to be able to own the data on these customers, who they are, and how to reach them over and over again, and give them the access, the perks that they're looking for to create repeat customers.
Yeah, completely agree, and I think that is kind of tied into that new economic model I talked about, enabled by Web3. So for us, it wasn't even a second thought. It's like any time a guest orders from a restaurant, that user data should be shared with that restaurant, right? Period. But beyond that, how about sharing more restaurant data with our operators, where even if it's a first-time guest, and so instead of having to build a profile on a customer over time, from day one, because that user has built, potentially through some gamified means, a profile on themselves that you can tap into and know everything that they want you to know about them as a restaurant, right? So if they want you to know their favorite glass of wine, if they want you to know their allergies, if they want you to know where they prefer to sit in the restaurant, window, or etc. That's all part of their profile that you can just tap into, even if it's the person's first time into your restaurant. That's the future. I see at least 3 organizations now working on how they can create that a global or a partial view around a consumer, a guest, that would be really valuable information for restaurants to know and incorporate into their practice, even if it's just tying into their existing system so they can be better action. But very exciting things coming with data simultaneously. It's like this kind of duality where more power is in the hands of the consumer to choose who has their data and what they're doing with it. But because guests want a VIP experience in restaurants, that's also going to be empowering restaurants to get more data, better data, and ultimately be able to provide better hospitality.
Yeah, data is king. That's how all these companies are making the big bucks from advertisers. But if you're able to own your own data and you've built a real kind of loyal community of buyers and of repeat customers, that's another opportunity for you that you can offer advertisers or sponsors to come in. Whether that's using the Rachel Ray example. We might say, hey, we have 2,000 loyalists that paid $500 to become part of this Rachel Ray club that loves this food. KitchenAid, you should probably sell a limited KitchenAid mixer to this audience because they're likely going to buy it, and you're targeting a very loyal fan base that will start talking about your product for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's break this down, right? Again, it's April.
10 minutes.
10 minutes left? Okay. We'll quickly get it over to Q&A, but I want to ask this question before we do. It's April 2nd now, 2023. How do operators make money with Web3 today, Peter?
They create their own native platforms.
Okay.
that's one way to eliminate those third-party fees. That could be anywhere from a 15 to 20% increase in revenue. I think that's number one is to create your own native platform. And if it can operate on Web3 like you're doing, Chad, I think more power to you.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like depending on the kind of business they are, right? I think everything starts with exploration. You don't just jump right into that. You got to start with education. And hopefully, we do answer that question. Like, where do you start with all this today? But you evaluate your kind of business and say, hey, is this the kind of thing right now where, with my guests and my opportunity, I do my own native platform, my own program, or is it something I kind of step into too lightly and dabble? And that's kind of what Devour focuses on, making it really easy for restaurants to step in and play, right? See how much business they can get by lighting up a new ordering channel like a DoorDash or Uber Eats, just plug it right in. But I mean, that's really so much of it's going to come down to that. What's going to pull people in? When people see the reports on how much money Starbucks has made with Odyssey, there's been industry reports of brand. I don't know if anybody knows WowBow, but they're launching a big Web3 initiative in May. And I think Starbucks is actually crushing it, and they're just in beta. It's going to go so much bigger, and WowBow is going to crush it too. I think once people see how much money there is in this space, everyone's going to follow it quickly. But even now, I think it's. How would you recommend people step into it and start to explore and learn?
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of headaches with this, and I said I've fallen on my face a couple of times at having research, but there's a ton of great partners out there that have done the research that can service you in a bunch of different ways if you want to get into Web3, whether that's subscription, whether that's loyalty, whether that's native ordering platforms. There's a ton of people that have gone through the trial and error. I think for us, our job is to make it, put it through that consumer lens and make it uncomplicated, understandable, and really undeniably easy, where everything's working on the back end, but the consumer doesn't realize it. I don't even like talking about Web3 or NFTs and putting that at the forefront. It's just about memberships. It's about loyalty, and it's about just enhancing these connections with your local communities, and how can you just make sure that a third party or other people aren't coming in to either take your data, take your customers, or take a massive percentage on every order.
Yeah, I'll say one thing and then let's turn it over to questions. In terms of what I've grown very fond of based on feedback for an entry point in this is pick something you are passionate about in life. It could be your restaurant, it could be food, it could be non-food, it could be underwater basket weaving like I mentioned before, it could be whatever. And let me know, this is my thing, Chad. I'll get back to you with where that is showing up in Web3, where there is a digital community around it. There is a community of over 1 million people that are all into this one thing. Pictures of birds with human arms. And as weird as that sounds, that is a thing. And so you can imagine if that's a community, there's a community about everything. So if you text me, email me, grab my info, or give me yours, I will do it. Or thing that drives you, something you care about, free, and is gathering a community. And that is something I think that will illustrate the opportunity that a restaurant has to be hyper-targeted into how they pull people into the restaurant. So who's got questions?
Anybody have any questions? I will say this. Half of Starbucks revenue is coming from me. I use that app every day, twice a day. So convenient. Millennial talking, right? All right. Anybody have any questions?
Or a statement. You could say, you guys, if you really confused me when you said this. Would love to clarify anything that was confusing, but ask questions too.
I'm going to reach from behind you here.
Can you help me understand consumable NFTs?
Consumable NFTs?
Right, so you're talking about a collectible NFT that has a benefit attached to it.
Yes.
I might use at a restaurant, but then it's used up, right? The value of the real world value of it's gone, but it might still have a collectible dimension to it.
It can be both. So how how I almost picture this is there's an app called Ate It app, and they do a bunch of different food pop-ups. But the way that you get access and your ticket, or almost like your coupon, it might just be a picture of a smash burger, and you go to the event, you open it up, and it can either be scanned or verified that, okay, this person bought this NFT and they get access now into the smash burger pop-up event. Now, after that event, that token can either be burned and go into oblivion, it's gone, or you can just keep the picture as a collectible, and then maybe a year down the road, you have your next Smash Burger pop-up event. If you are original holder of this coupon, great, it's already in your wallet, you're keeping it, you get access for free to this event, or you get access 50% off. So it can work both ways of, hey, it can work like a ticket, or it can work like a coupon that you can put value on over and over again, a digital coupon that, hey, I got 50% off the first time, a year later, I'm going to keep this in my wallet because it might have, new value just by holding on to it, but you can also just eliminate it the same way that you might throw out a coupon.
Good question.
Do we have any more questions? I'm going to go find birds with human arms now on the internet. I'm going to go down that dark hole because that sounds interesting.
After that, check out the one that's all about people who like to drink beer in the shower.
I think we need to learn some things about. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. That was extremely informative. A lot of great stuff. They'll be hanging out here if you have any questions that you didn't want to say into the microphone. They'll be here hanging out for a little while. Feel free to visit them. And do you guys have booths here? I think you do.
No.
Thank you so much.
Next year. Thank you, everybody.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody.